Should you be ashamed to be British?
It's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.
Yo, my beautiful people, it's your boy Shade, the one and the only, and today, guys, we are back again. Today, guys, I was sent a video by Mr. Fact Checker. Alright, he said, should you be ashamed to be British? Well, I'm going to tell you this. Should you be ashamed to be British? Why? Okay, I'm going to smash like, subscribe, and like, and then we're going to check this video out to see what he's got to say. Oh, I'm the first like. Oh, amazing. Let me be the... Oh, I'm not the first comment. Okay, you know what? Let's check this video out.
Should you be ashamed to be British? Great Britain went from being a relatively small, unsuspecting island off the coast of Europe to controlling roughly a quarter of the world's landmass. One might assume that Britons would be impressed and inspired by this, but in fact many across this island nation view their country's past as a source of great shame.
Look, listen. Let's say I was born British, yeah, and my country did this. I'll be very proud at the achievement of my people, okay? At the same time, I mean, I'll still, have maybe some shame at maybe the atrocities they committed, okay? But I would be proud that my people were that clever to actually take over the world. Imagine it was Nigeria, I'd be like, wow, okay. So back in the day, they were clever. Brutal but clever. Okay, how can we make it better now, rather than be brutal? Okay, doing a better way.
At present, the country is at boiling point, with riots recently sweeping the nation, and the future looks worrying to say the least. But for now, let's look to the past to see if Britons can take pride in their heritage, or if they should in fact feel shame for the actions of their forebearers. Let's begin by finding out why some view Britain as uniquely despicable. Many claim that the British people come from a long line of enslavers, thieves and murderers, allegations which largely stem from the actions of the British Empire, many of which were indeed brutal. Britain, as previously mentioned, controlled a significant portion of the world, and an empire doesn't get to that size without a bit of violence.
True.
The British conquered country after country, and as people usually don't appreciate being taken over by a foreign people, they made plenty of enemies along the way.
True.
Whilst conquest is never peaceful, there are numerous examples of appalling British acts against native populations. In 1919, British soldiers opened fire on thousands at a peaceful rally in Amritsar, India, killing anywhere from 379 to 1,500 protesters. The British also notoriously contributed to the deaths of roughly 1 million people during the Irish potato famine by forcing the Irish people to continue to export food despite major shortages.
Yeah, that I heard of. Yeah, I checked out that video. You guys asked me to check it out, so I checked it out and I saw it and I was like, wow. Like, to be honest, yeah, back in the day, things were brutal. Really brutal. I'm telling you, it's been so crazy.
Britain was also one of the first countries to use concentration camps, imprisoning thousands of Afrikaners in them during the Second Boer War. Remaining in South Africa, the British created racist laws there prior to independence, banning black people from voting and only allowing them to live in certain areas, beginning the chain of events that led to apartheid and South Africa being the modern world's most unequal country. This isn't the only present-day issue that is a direct result of British imperialism. Today's tensions and territorial disputes between India and Pakistan stem from the partition of British India, when the subcontinent was hastily divided into a Hindu and a Muslim state, inadequately considering religious and ethnic boundaries, leading to 1 million people dying, largely due to intercommunal violence, and 15 million being displaced. The unstable nature of the Middle East is also partly due to British imperialism. In 1916, Britain and France signed the Sykes-Picot Agreement, splitting up the Ottoman Empire between the two countries once the First World War had ended.
Oh, wait. Was it that time when the British and the French partitioned, what you call it, Palestine, and then cut out a piece of the land, and then they gave it over to Israel, and then Palestine had a piece of land? I tried to read up on that, but it's so complicated.
Again, little consideration was given to ethnic boundaries, splitting up certain groups and depriving them of self-determination, whilst giving major power to certain local rulers who had found favour with Europeans. This agreement led to the creation of unstable nations such as Lebanon, Syria and Iraq, and is significantly responsible for the Kurdish-Turkish conflict which lasts to this day.
Wow.
This agreement is also responsible for the Arab-Israeli conflict. As part of the deal, Britain received the region of Palestine, and in 1917, Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour declared that Britain would use the territory to establish a national home for the Jewish people. Whilst he did promise to protect the rights of existing non-Jews in the region, over a century later, conflict is still raging between the Jewish state and its Arab neighbours, with thousands dying on both sides and millions of Palestinians being displaced. Britain was also a key player in the slave...
Wait. Great Britain have their hands in a lot of crazy things happening around the world. A lot of wars. This is mad. Yo, this is crazy. Like, people need to study history, you know.
Sides and millions of Palestinians being displaced. Britain was also a key player in the slave trade, with British ships transporting millions of African slaves across the Atlantic to do forced labour in brutal conditions. English cities like Bristol and Liverpool enjoyed great prosperity from the trade, and the Crown also profited, with monarchs such as Elizabeth I and Charles II investing heavily in slave trading voyages. Britain also has a reputation for thievery, with the British Museum in London possessing many historical artefacts that are viewed as stolen, such as the Benin bronzes which were looted from the Kingdom of Benin by British troops in 1897.
Nigeria.
And it's not just the British Museum who possess some dubiously acquired goods. The crown worn by Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, at her coronation, which currently sits on display in the Tower of London, features a diamond which has been claimed by the governments of India, Pakistan, Iran and Afghanistan, as it was previously owned by a variety of rulers in the Indian subcontinent before mysteriously ending up in British hands. Furthermore, the British often exploited the...
He said before mysteriously ending up in the British hands.
Iran and Afghanistan, as it was previously owned by a variety of rulers in the Indian subcontinent before mysteriously ending up in British hands. Furthermore, the British often exploited the indigenous populations of their colonies for financial gain, forcing the natives to sell their goods to the British at incredibly low prices, and requiring them to buy British goods at inflated prices.
Boom.
This created huge profits for Britain, with some even estimating that the UK exploited India out of the equivalent of $45 trillion during its time in the subcontinent. And even after the British Empire ended with the handover of Hong Kong in 1997, the UK has continued to do some evil things around the world. In 2003, Britain and America invaded Iraq, claiming that the Gulf nation's dictator Saddam Hussein was involved in the September 11th attacks in New York and possessed weapons of mass destruction. Both allegations proved to be false, with certain British political figures misleading the public to justify the invasion, which was in fact largely motivated by a desire to control Iraqi oil. Thousands of civilians died in the war, with millions more forced to flee their homes, and Iraq, which was a relatively stable country under Hussein, albeit with less than ideal human rights, is now incredibly dangerous, ravaged by terrorism ever since the war. It is quite evident that over the years Britain has engaged in numerous atrocious acts that we today view with horror. But we must remember that many of these actions were far more common and acceptable in the past than they are today.
Let's be honest here, talking about the past. Like right now, as I'm looking at this, because of how there's so much peace right now, I mean, there's not much peace in the world, but compared to back in the day, there's more peace. The amount of empires there were before, like the Ottoman empires, like the atrocities they committed, the Barbary slave trade. Then when you go back a bit again, you talk about the Mongolian Empire. Then when you go back again, talk about the Roman Empire. Talk about people like Alexander the Great. Then going back in the day, the things that were happening, slavery was just so common that even in scriptures, even the Bible, they talk about slaves and slavery. They say slaves do this, honor your master, slave. I'm not sure about the Quran. I'm not Muslim, so I don't know about the Quran if they talk about slaves. No, I think they talk about slaves. Yes, buying and selling slaves in the Quran. I heard people talk about it. Slavery back then, things that were the norm back then, yeah, compared to now, are very brutal. Nothing like human rights. So we need to be grateful for the stability we have now, and then try to work towards improving things rather than trying to take things backward, rather than working towards revenge. Because revenge begets revenge, and deaths, and there will be no progress. So it's tough. It's a tough pill to swallow.
War. It is quite evident that over the years Britain has engaged in numerous atrocious acts that we today view with horror. But we must remember that many of these actions were far more common and acceptable in the past than they are today. You will struggle to find a country without a brutal history. Slavery has been practiced by cultures across the globe for millennia, such as in the Arab and Barbary slave trades, and is still widespread in parts of the world today.
Yes.
It is only in the past few centuries that the view that slavery is an abhorrent practice has become mainstream, with Britain at the forefront of the abolitionist movement. Slavery was never actually legal in Britain proper, and was outlawed in British colonies before it was banned by America, Spain, France, Portugal, and Russia. British MP William Wilberforce devoted his life to fighting slavery, and many Brits did similar. After abolishing the slave trade in 1807, the British Royal Navy spent over 60 years patrolling the Atlantic Ocean to enforce the ban, with around 20,000 British sailors dying. Britain's opposition to the slave trade came at great financial cost to the nation, with it only paying off the debt it accumulated freeing slaves in 2015, around 200 years after they began the process. In fact, it's arguable that no country has done more to combat this practice, which has been widely accepted for millennia, than the United Kingdom. Conquest and empire have also been a prominent part of all human history, as evidenced by the Spanish Empire, Rashidun Caliphate, Mali Empire, Aztec Empire, Persian Empire, and many, many more. One wonders why conquerors like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar are revered, but the British Empire is vilified. There are also some common myths about the British Empire that make it seem uniquely evil. You've likely heard that Britain has invaded 90% of the world's countries. This statement is somewhat misleading, as it implies that the United Kingdom has launched wars of conquest against the overwhelming majority of countries, when in fact many of these so-called invasions were actually defensive. For example, the so-called invasion of Japan in the 1940s was actually a joint response to the attack on US troops in Pearl Harbor and the Japanese invasion of British colonies in Southeast Asia. This statistic also overlooks the fact that borders are ever-changing and many modern countries are only recent entities. In fact, less than 70 of the world's roughly 200 countries existed in their current form before World War II, after which the UK began rapidly decolonizing. Some also claim that Britain invented concentration camps, and were the first nation to use them during the Second Boer War. This is not the case. Concentration camps were first used by the Spanish in 1896, during the Cuban War of Independence, 3 years before Britain's first usage of them. It is quite evident that, whilst the United Kingdom has committed its fair share of atrocities, it is not unique in its evil. But an area where Britain is unique is the positive impact it has had on the world we live in today.
Okay, first of all, before we talk about this, I want to know, what is the Second Boer War? So, Second Boer War, a conflict fought between the British Empire and the two Boer republics, the South African Republic and Orange Free State. Okay, I see that.
Firstly, some of the most prosperous countries in the world are former British colonies, including Australia, America, Canada, New Zealand and Singapore. Furthermore, it wouldn't be controversial to say that Britain has had the greatest cultural impact of any country in history.
Okay. This is so much.
No country, besides maybe Greece, has had more influence on the spread of democracy than Britain. The British Parliament in Westminster is known as the mother of all parliaments, due to the fact that over 35 countries use the so-called Westminster system, involving a ceremonial head of state, an elected parliament, and a government formed by the party with the majority of the representatives. British imperialism also helped to eradicate barbaric cultural practices across the world. Cannibalism was...
I'm not gonna lie, something that Great Britain helped Nigeria with was twins. I know in Nigeria, if you had twins, they would kill, I think, one or kill them both. But the British ended that. So that's one definitely, what am I saying? That's definitely a good thing Great Britain has done for Nigeria.
Also helped to eradicate barbaric cultural practices across the world. Cannibalism was widespread in pre-colonial Australia. However, as the colonizers' Christian faith spread throughout the Aboriginal community, it began to die down. The introduction of Christianity by British individuals also benefited parts of Africa, such as when Scottish missionary Mary Slessor shared the gospel with the Afik tribe in what is now Nigeria, resulting in them abandoning their practice of killing twin babies due to fear of them being cursed. And in India, British authorities clamped down on the at least 2,000-year-old Hindu practice of sati, in which widows were made to sit on top of their deceased husband's funeral fire as a form of sacrifice. Additionally, some of the world's most popular sports, including football, rugby, cricket and golf, originate from Britain. And regarding literature, some of the world's greatest writers have been British, such as George Orwell, J.K. Rowling, Charles Dickens and Jane Austen, and the world's most famous and impactful literary figure, William Shakespeare. Britons have also greatly impacted the musical scene with groups such as Queen, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, as well as artists like Elton John, David Bowie and Adele. But the most obvious cultural impact that the British have had on the world is the English language.
Yeah.
Despite England being a relatively small nation of less than 60 million, its language is the most spoken in the world with over 1 billion speakers. Britain is also responsible for some of the world's most important advancements in science and technology. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain due to the invention of the steam engine and railways. Britons invented many other things that we take for granted, including vaccines, penicillin, jet engines and the World Wide Web. Furthermore, some of the world's greatest scientists were British, such as Isaac Newton, who discovered the laws of gravity, Francis Bacon, who came up with the scientific method, and Francis Crick, who helped to discover the chemical structure of DNA. Only America has produced more Nobel Prize laureates than the United Kingdom. As for the claim that the British Museum is full of stolen goods, some of these artefacts are in fact far better off in a museum in London than where they were found. For example, its most famous artefact, the Rosetta Stone, an ancient stele which has been crucial for historians to decipher ancient languages, was actually being used as a brick in an Egyptian fortress when it was discovered by French soldiers.
Wow.
The British people also have a military history that is rivaled by few, as evidenced by the fact that Britain went from being a relatively small island off the coast of Europe to conquering a quarter of the world. Britain has defeated some of history's most infamous dictators. Napoleon was defeated once and for all by a British-led coalition at Waterloo, and it was the UK and its empire who stood alone against Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany between the fall of France in 1940 and the German invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941. Britain also has a track record of defending smaller nations from tyranny. In 1489, King Henry VII of England sent thousands of troops to help defend the Duchy of Brittany from a French invasion. And less than a century later, his granddaughter Queen Elizabeth I supported the Dutch in their uprising against Spanish persecution. This trend continued into the 20th century, with Britain entering World War I as a response to Germany violating Belgium's neutrality and declaring war on Nazi Germany in World War II due to its invasion of Poland.
Wow.
Overall, it is clear that, as opposed to being uniquely evil, Britain has done some uniquely great things.
Yeah.
Granted, it has had more than its fair share of barbarism, but what other countries haven't committed numerous acts that are appalling by modern standards? Additionally, there are few, if any, countries in the world that have had as much of a positive impact as the UK. The positive impact Great Britain has had on democracy, sports, arts, culture, science, medicine and technology are arguably unmatched, and it has a track record of standing up to injustice and tyranny in the largest possible ways. Without the Brits, Hitler may well have won, the transatlantic slave trade may have lasted much longer, and millions more across the globe may have died from measles, smallpox, tetanus, and any other disease that vaccines are fighting. Therefore, if someone tries to tell you that the British people should be ashamed of their past, do remember that no country has a squeaky clean record, and that almost no one has brought the world as many positive changes as the inhabitants of this somewhat small, relatively unsuspecting island off the coast of Europe.
Wow. Wow. I must say, this video is very, very well balanced. Really balanced. He talked about the atrocities of the British, then he talked about the good that the British have done. He talked about everything. He didn't just try to lick the ass of, pardon my French, he didn't try to, kiss the ass of the British people, okay, to paint the British people as saints, as angels. He didn't try to bash the British people, to paint them like demons, devils, okay. He talked about both sides, okay. You have a body, you have a shadow. You have the light side, you have the dark side. Everything has an advantage, has a disadvantage. He talked about the atrocities and the good they've done for the whole world. And I must say, in Nigeria, I know about the past of Nigeria, like Nigeria's past, even forget the colonial era, forget slave trade. Nigeria's past, before the white people came, was crazy. Like, we've heard the stories, like we've been told the stories. It goes down through folklore, and our parents also tell us all the tribal marks we have on our faces and many things were due to the horrors of those days. They had to put marks on their faces to protect themselves from other people, from being abducted, and even when people are abducted, they put marks on their faces so that they will know that, okay, this person is ours, do not kill this person. And then when slave trade started, like, I know of how Africans, were selling off their people to other neighboring countries, okay, and then the white people came and they got some people being sold off to them as well. And then slave trade, from the African slave trade started. But I know there has been slave trade all around the world before Africa. But I'm telling you, every country has their brutal sides, their negative sides. They have the horrors they've committed. Okay, but we know about the British one because they invaded most of the world, and then they're out there in the light, and the people see their own mistakes. People don't really talk about much of the Ottoman Empire. People don't talk about the evil of many other empires, like even the Mongolian Empire. I don't know much about it. People don't talk much about the Barbaries, but every empire has the fair share of the evil they've committed. Okay, but yeah, should you be ashamed to be British? No, you shouldn't. Like, why should you? Your ancestors did this, all right? They did this, yeah, and it's your time, yeah, your turn to do better. Okay, that's just basically what I think it is. Yeah, but you shouldn't be ashamed of your ancestry. You shouldn't be ashamed of yourself. You shouldn't be ashamed of your origins. Okay, all you need to do is learn history, so you know where you're coming from, so you can know the mistakes to avoid, so you can know where you're going to, so you don't let history repeat itself. Because history is something that loves to repeat itself. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about this in the comment section. I'm going to catch you in the next video. Love, peace out.
More than words can say, you I need. Oh, you are the light that shine in my way. You I need. Oh, I love you more than words can say, you I need. Oh, you are the light that shine in my way.